Hello everyone, I've had a lot of people asking me about the potential leak that appeared on Reddit recently. Now I'll be honest with you, I did see this leak when it originally posted about a month ago, but I didn't really give it any thought because it just seemed kind of foolish. It seemed way too detailed to be a leak. Creative Assembly don't really plan that far ahead in most cases, and if they do, they're not really going to just tell random people in a interview. Even if it is investors, the only people that would be privy to that information would be Sega and Games Workshop. But there has been some reveals lately which kind of show a little bit of truth to it. And while this leak could end up being false and just pretty on the nose with some details, keep in mind that that does happen fairly often, I do feel like it's important to talk about in the event that it may be true. So let's do that today. There is a lot to talk about. Alright, we're going to be going in section by section. I'm going to use my amazing paint skills. My cat is trying to move my hand around. So there we go. First section, Noska, Slaanesh, High Elves. This is not really new leaks. This is something that we've been hearing about for a while. There's been speculation for loads of content creators, myself included, for the past 2 months, and this isn't information that we're told early. The fact is, the Dark Elves are practically done, and as much as I would like the Dark Elves, it just didn't make sense. And I think a lot of other content creators would say the same thing. At this point, it would have been Noska or it would have been Lizardmen. Both of them are in desperate need of major reworks. Noska is the faction from Game 1 that has needed a lot more help though, and it does seem like Creative Assembly wanted to go back and finally, let's be honest, fix up that mess of a race. There was just no reason to play Noska. Mods could kind of help it out, but the fact of the matter is you shouldn't have to rely on mods to fix up a faction. The mods should be there to enhance your playstyle. That's it. Now let's get into some specifics. Apparently the High Elves would be Sea Lord Aisling. Yeah, that makes sense considering that it's one of the only factions left. The Sea Helm, well, fits with Sea Lord Aisling. Merworm, we should have had that in Warhammer 2. The Caradrian of the Flame, it's a character there. It's a possible legendary hero at the end of the day, so this stuff all kind of seems in line. What just kind of doesn't is the mysterious sea elemental, as listed here, which would be the incarnate elemental of life. It doesn't fit, it never had a model, it just makes no sense. There's already one centerpiece unit with Merworm, there's going to be another one if Aisling is there with the Skycutter. There is just wasted time to do a sea elemental. Plus, we don't have real naval battles. It's going to look weird to see an incarnate elemental of life just charging through the battlefield. It just kind of breaks immersion. Sail the Faithless, confirmed. A bit odd, because obviously he's not a Norscan, he's a Dolgan, which is part of the Kurgan people. But, yeah, so far, that was on the nose. It makes sense, though. It's a character that did have a model. Keep in mind that there's not a lot of Norscan-specific or Northman-specific characters. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense to go with Sail. Plus, it ties in the Tamarkan campaign. It gives you a bit more of the Throne of Chaos campaign. Bjorg Bearstruck as a legendary hero, well, that's something that could be possible. He is a Norscan. He is a Dog of War, and there's a Dog of War section, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. And to be fair, the Werebear character as Bjorg would make a lot of sense. It would just be kind of fun. Cursed Aten as a unit, I mean, that's something that I've been speculating. It does fit with the theme of Noska quite heavily, and it is very, very cool. The Dreadmaw, on the other hand, again, I don't see why that would be a thing. We've already got a centerpiece with the Cursed Aten, which would be a hybrid giant monster / spellcaster, and it does look like Creative Assembly are pushing the Chimera to be quite important. Also, the Dreadmaw, it would just be way too many monsters. We need some mortals. This is Noska. They're supposed to have mortals. They're supposed to have humans. Slaanesh, despite the video info, they also have access to a Praeton. I mean, the Praeton's kind of been hinted there with the teaser trailer because there is a spellcaster with like a Praeton head. It kind of looks like one at least. Maybe that's wrong and it's just basically a random mutated doe. Well, moose, but we're going to have to wait and see. The Praeton, I would say, doesn't really fit with Slaanesh. I would much prefer a gigantic Chaos Spawn. But we're going to have to wait and see there. It could happen, and that's another unit for the Beastmen, but we already know that the Slangors are basically confirmed. Well, they're not confirmed, but considering that the last 3 DLCs have had this God-Touch specific gore, it would be very strange if we didn't have a Slangor. Alright, the next section. Dogs of War has likely been killed. I'm assuming that this is a reaction to the potential of Bjorg Bearstruck. So, this is the thing. I don't think Bjorg coming in, Bjorg, which was a regiment of renown, not a proper, massive character in the Dogs of War, means that the Dogs of War have been killed off. The Dogs of War have been found in the game files. Gorg is linked up to a Dogs of War thing in the DB, right, in the database, and we have seen commits for Lucaresia Belladonna and Borchio the Besieger. If it's the case that the Dogs of War have been killed off because they have been slowly kind of adding in some Dogs of War stuff over the years now with DLCs, that's going to be incredibly disappointing. Creative Assembly can be dumb, but I don't think that they're going to be that dumb. Dogs of War would generate a lot of hype. It is the last official army book that is missing. Keep in mind that yes, the Dogs of War did have a proper army book, and even if we don't get Int, Koresh, Nippon and stuff, the game will not feel complete while there are placeholder factions in the Southern Realms. Those placeholder factions have been there since Game 1, and most people have just modded it out with the Southern Realms mod, but it needs to be done. And not being funny, but there is the perfect chance for Creative Assembly Sophia, CA Sophia, to be able to just shine. They've done a mechanic for Total War Troy, which would be perfect, and I mean absolutely perfect for the Dogs of War. I've covered it in previous videos. It would be a massive shame, and it would not allow them to get the spotlight that they want. Let's be clear, they do want a little bit of a shining spotlight. This section's why I started doubting stuff, the roadmap section. Only 1 to 2 DLCs are left between the Sinesh DLC and the End Times DLC. So that makes me feel like there's 4 DLCs total, right? Sinesh DLC, 1 to 2 DLCs, and then the End Times DLC. Which around 8 months of DLC, that's going to take us all the way up to 2027, maybe? 2028? Because Creative Assembly have slowed down dramatically, that is entirely possible, but then we start to see some weird stuff. Beastmen will have 1 more DLC for Moonclaw. There is nothing left for the Beastmen. If they put the Praeton with Sinesh, there is nothing left for the Beastmen. There is some stuff, but unless they're going to do mostly characters, it just doesn't make sense. While I would like some Beastmen DLC, at this point I'd say, well, maybe just a character pack. That's something that's been spoken about a long time now on this channel. There will be a DLC for the Monkey King with his own faction. Wouldn't that be the End Times DLC just to kind of round it up? Or, at the end of the day, the Monkey King could have been its own sub-faction, right? It could be possible to have it by itself, but Cafe by itself is just not going to be received well by the community. We've seen that with that Lords of Shangyang leak. And then finally, there is some possibility for a Tomb Kings DLC. So, what, Nagash, I guess, kind of falls onto the Tomb Kings, unless he's going to be given his own race section. But even then, it's Tomb Kings. And yes, there is enough for a Tomb Kings DLC. You could actually get a pretty good-looking Tomb King DLC. But considering that apparently Nagash is already in the next section, though, I don't see it happening. There's a lot of possible DLCs. Listen, I could easily sit down and I could write maybe 12 DLC ideas in a video, which would actually end up looking fairly decent with the current format of 1v1v1. In fact, I might do that later, well, this coming week, because, yeah, I've got some notes. But you can see the inconsistencies here. Everything just sounds really, really out of the blue. I'm not saying that this is wrong, because we're going to have to wait and see, but this just sounds incredibly inconsistent. There's talk about the game basically being in its death knell, and then, oh no, but there's still a chance for this faction, and this faction, and that faction to get a DLC. Alright, then the End Times DLC. This isn't new information. A lot of people have been speculating about a End Times DLC for quite some time now, especially as we've started getting actual End Times content in the game. So let's read it over. Yes, the End Times is coming again for all the fantasy lovers. CA and GW will blow up the world again. The DLC will be a 5-faction content pack, with the price being higher than a normal pack. I mean, that makes sense. It's 5 factions apparently. The planned races are Skaven. Yep, that's End Times units are missing. Empire, Midland, I guess Boris will get his day. Cafe, well, if it's not the Monkey King, as stated before, who is it going to be? Just random Li Dao? Random Yin Yin? Maybe it's, I don't know, some random dude in Northern Cafe. A rice farmer who becomes a hero. Nagash, well, he'd have to come with the Tomb King stuff, so why is the Tomb King DLC a possibility? And Chaos, the Glotkin, so another Nurgle faction, I guess that makes sense. Actually, we did speak about that in a previous video, mostly because a lot of people want the Putrid Blight Kings and stuff like that, it is very, very clear there that could be a possible DLC. It does mean that Nurgle will end up with more legendary lords than others, but at the end of the day, it's not a bad choice, and a lot of people do like the Glock. And the novella is very, very well written. Perhaps some of the only small bits of the end times that isn't pure garbage. Let's continue. CA is testing some gameplay changes for the map in the final DLC. For example, releasing the Great Vortex will cause Orth 1 to disappear from the map. That would require more work than it's worth. And considering how Creative Assembly have done stuff to maps and then they have completely broken the game and required hotfixes and so on, that is not worth anything. I don't think that's going to be the case. Making Orth 1 completely disappear from the map would require another phase. It wouldn't be like, for example, how it is for Realm of Chaos, because it's a separate section of the map. Remember that the Chaos Realms, they pop up, but they're still there. They're just kept invisible. That's why I find it really strange there. And then the leak also mentioned an avatar of Sigmar. Oh yeah, Volton. The Mary Sue. Okay. This is why I find it strange. This is why I find it incredibly strange. Now, I could see an End Times DLC being a 5 content pack. It's going to be very, very expensive, by the way, considering that right now the 1v1 we've won is, what, 25 quid? So, yeah, just add another 14 quid there. It's going to be a little bit more, right? And all these things could be true, but I very much doubt, like I said before, that Creative Assembly is going to reveal information that in-depth. Sure, CA has the information, Sega and GW do, but they're not going to tell anyone, even other investors or whatever. Maybe in confidence, but you'd have to get someone pretty drunk for that, I think. The last part is where the alarm bells start going off, right? It's like, after all, I really hope these leaks end up to be rumors and we can have a longer roadmap of new races. Unfortunately, the end times is coming. Right, so in some cases, some people do get some sort of correct information and then they just make shit up, right? So they could have heard about, like, the Sinesh stuff, they could have heard about the Heil stuff, they could have heard about the Noska stuff, whatever, and then they go, okay, let's just pad this out so I can get clicks and farm karma. Because there has been a lot of leaks and fake leaks on Reddit over the years. This series is, what, 10 years old now? There's been a lot of them. Sometimes they've been true. Sometimes they've come from people who have been part of Creative Assembly's Good Boy Club, or even people who have been beta testing, because it's very well known when it was during Warhammer 2 that a beta tester was actually leaking. That whole, it came to me in a dream, and people just ate it up. I'd say there could be a level of truth here, and I'm trying not to see this as fact until we get down the line. Given what Creative Assembly have been doing in terms of, like, actually producing content, this is 2-3 years down the line until we get to the end time stuff. I know what some people are saying, development is going slower because they're working on stuff like maybe Total War 40k and so on. I can believe that. My main thing here is that this game is not done yet, and if they don't leave it at a pretty good state, you know, finally fix up sieges, which they said is coming, but they've been saying is coming for quite some time now, reworks for the Lizardmen, the Dark Elves, you know, factions that desperately need some help, well, that's going to be a problem. And it's going to make me not trust CA as much when it comes to a potential Total War 40k, because it does mean that eventually that game's going to have the same treatment. And it's been the issue with a lot of Total War games in the past. Total War 3 Kingdoms, left in a pretty weird state. Attila, left in a pretty weird state. I do believe that there is an element of truth in these leaks, but not as much as people are panicking about. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion, especially about the last part. You know, the whole thing about CA ending the game a bit too early without fixing up all the core issues in the title. And have a great day, guys. There's been a lot of content recently, basically being back-to-back with Skulls. There's a few Skull videos that need to come out too, but that's later down the line. But have a great day, guys. I'm going back to paint. It's been a lot of time. I have not been able to paint at all this week. So yeah.